At 8:15 on the evening of May 22, 1981, a rookie FBI agent named Freddie Toole was sitting in an unmarked car on the south end of the James Jackson Parkway bridge, watching nothing happen. He had been there for weeks. The stakeout had become a joke among the men who worked it. 12 hours of staring at black water, listening to the Chattahoochee River move under the concrete, swatting mosquitoes off the back of his neck. The bridge itself was unremarkable, a 2-lane span of poured concrete carrying traffic between Cobb County and northwest Atlanta, the kind of crossing you drive over 4,000 times in your life without once looking down. There was a liquor store on the north side. There was a boat ramp below. There was, on that particular night, a full moon, and the water was moving fast, because it had rained earlier in the week upstream. Toole had a thermos, a clipboard, and a radio. He had been told to listen for a car stopping in the middle of the span. Then he heard a splash. Not a small one, not a fish, not a branch. A loud, heavy, flat sound, the sound a body makes when it hits water from 30 feet up. He would testify later that he did not have to think about what it was. He got on the radio. A white 1970 Chevrolet station wagon rolled slowly off the bridge and turned into the liquor store parking lot, then turned around and came back across, heading south. Officers on both ends converged. At 2:15 in the morning, nearly 6 hours after the splash, because the pursuit and the radio traffic and the confusion of a 14-bridge surveillance operation ate the intervening time. An Atlanta police recruit named Carl Holden pulled that station wagon over on Jackson Parkway. The driver was 23 years old, 5'4", 130 pounds, soft-spoken, wearing glasses with heavy plastic frames. He had a police scanner in the car. He had a briefcase. He said he was a music promoter on his way to an audition with a singer in Sandy Springs. He was polite. He was cooperative. He answered every question with the slightly formal precision of a man who had rehearsed being questioned. He handed over a business card. On the card was a name that, within 72 hours, would be on the front page of every newspaper in America. 2 days later, on May 24th, the body of a 27-year-old man named Nathaniel Cater surfaced in the Chattahoochee, about a mile downstream from that bridge, caught in brush near the Cobb County line. He was nude. He had been dead somewhere between 2 and 3 days. To understand how a city arrived at the point where federal agents were sitting on river bridges in the dark, waiting for the sound of something being thrown in, you have to go back 23 months. Atlanta in 1979 was a city that had built its entire identity on a phrase, the city too busy to hate. It was on brochures. It was in speeches. It had a black mayor, Maynard Jackson, only the second in the city's history, a large man with a booming voice and a Morehouse pedigree. It had a black public safety commissioner, Lee Brown, a criminologist with a doctorate, recruited from Oregon. It had a black police chief. It had the Carter White House connection, the Hartsfield Airport expansion, corporate headquarters moving south for the tax rates and the weather. The Omni was new. The MARTA rail line had opened in 1979. In the national imagination, Atlanta was the proof of concept, the place where the promises of the civil rights movement had actually been cashed and deposited. And underneath that, in neighborhoods like Dixie Hills and Eastlake Meadows and Thomasville Heights and Techwood Homes, there were housing projects where the elevators didn't work and the stairwells smelled like urine and standing water. There were children who left in the morning to hustle up a few dollars, carrying groceries out to cars at the Kroger on Moreland Avenue for a quarter a bag, shining shoes downtown, sweeping up in barber shops, running errands for men whose names nobody wrote down. In the summer, the swimming pools at the city parks were free, and that mattered enormously, because a free swimming pool is where a kid without money goes. Many of the boys who died had last been seen at a pool, or on the way to one, or walking home from one in wet shorts. On July 28, 1979, a woman looking for aluminum cans walked into a wooded area off Niskey Lake Road on the southwest side of the city. It was a Saturday. The grass was chest high. She found the body of a 14-year-old boy lying face up in a patch of underbrush. His name was Edward Hope Smith. People called him Teddy. He was 14, he liked to sing, and he had last been seen 5 days earlier, leaving a skating rink on Gordon Road. He had been shot once with a .22 caliber weapon. About 50 feet away, in the same patch of woods, the woman found a second body. This one was 13 years old. His name was Alfred Evans, and he had last been seen 4 days before the heading downtown to see a kung fu movie at a theater on Peachtree. He had been asphyxiated. His body was already badly decomposed. 2 boys, same woods, different causes of death. The medical examiner's office logged them, assigned 2 case numbers, and moved on. There was no press conference. There was a short item in the paper. In September, a 9-year-old named Milton Harvey disappeared while running an errand to the bank for his mother, riding a yellow bicycle down Gordon Road. The bicycle turned up in a ditch a few days later. He turned up 7 months later, off Redwine Road in East Point, so decomposed that the cause of death could never be established. In October, Yusuf Bell, 9 years old, was sent by his mother to buy a can of snuff for an elderly neighbor named Eula Birdsong. He was a bright kid, an honor student, a chess player, a boy who read encyclopedias for fun, and the son of a woman named Camille Bell, who worked in a laundry and had been part of the movement in the 60s. He walked to the store on McDaniel Street. A witness said she saw him get into a blue car. He never came back. 18 days later, a school custodian looking for a place to relieve himself pushed open a door at the abandoned E.P. Johnson Elementary School on Campbellton Road and found Yusuf's body wedged into a crawl space in the ceiling above a wall. He had been strangled, probably with a cord or a hand. He was wearing the same clothes, and his feet were clean, completely clean. Somebody had removed his shoes and socks and put them back on him after he was dead, and had done it somewhere with a floor, indoors, out of the mud. That detail, the clean feet, sat in a file and did nothing for a very long time. Here is the thing that has to be said plainly, because it is the reason this case became what it became. For the first 10 months, there was no case. There were incident reports. There were separate detectives working separate homicides in separate zones with separate case numbers, filed in separate cabinets, in a department that at the time did not have a computerized system capable of cross-referencing missing juveniles against unidentified bodies. And there was a police department that categorized the deaths of poor black children in Atlanta in 1979 the way police departments across the country categorized them, as the statistically expected background noise of urban life, a runaway, a drug thing, a domestic thing, a kid who got into something with somebody. There were 400 and some homicides a year in the metro area. 9 children spread over 11 months, did not, on paper, look like a wave. The mothers noticed first, not the police, not the FBI, not the press. Camille Bell, whose son Yusuf had been found in the crawl space, started calling other mothers because she had realized that no one else was going to connect the phone numbers. She called Willie Mae Mathis, whose 11-year-old son Jeffrey had vanished in March 1980 after being sent out to buy cigarettes at a service station on Gordon Road, and who would not be found for 11 months. She called Venus Taylor, whose daughter Angel Lanier, 12 years old, had been found tied to a tree in a wooded lot 6 days after she left home to watch television at a friend's house. Her hands bound behind her with an electrical cord, a pair of someone else's underwear lodged in her throat. She called Annie Hill. She called Sheila Baltazar. In April 1980, in a house on the South Side, these women founded an organization and gave it a name, the Committee to Stop Children's Murders. They had no budget. They had a mimeograph machine, a card table, a rotary phone, and a list. The list was handwritten, at first, in pencil with dates and ages, and the last place each child had been seen. They took the list downtown. They stood in front of City Hall on Mitchell Street and read the names out loud. They went on WAOK and WIGO, the black radio stations, and read the names again. They knocked on doors in the projects. They said the same sentence over and over in slightly different words. Someone is killing our children, and no one is looking for him. The response initially was that they were exaggerating. That grief had made them see a pattern that wasn't there. A police spokesman told a reporter that there was no evidence linking the cases, which was, in the narrowest technical sense, defensible. The causes of death were wildly inconsistent. Gunshot and strangulation and asphyxiation and stabbing and blunt force. The geography was spread across 5 jurisdictions and 2 counties. The victims ranged from 7 to 15 years old, and one of them was a girl. In the broader sense, it was one of the more consequential failures of institutional imagination in American criminal history, and everyone involved knew it within a year. By July 1980, the number of dead and missing black children in Atlanta had reached 9, and the mothers were being quoted in the national press. The city could no longer hold the line. Commissioner Lee Brown announced the formation of a special task force. It started with 4 investigators working out of a room with borrowed desks. Within months, it would have more than 100, plus FBI agents assigned under the theory that the children might have been kidnapped across state lines, plus the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, plus volunteers in orange vests walking grid searches through kudzu, plus psychics, plus a former Green Beret offering to hunt the killer with tracking dogs, plus every self-appointed expert in the Western Hemisphere calling the tip line, which logged something like 150,000 calls before it was over. And still the children kept disappearing. Christopher Richardson, 12, on his way to a swimming pool in DeKalb County, June 1980. LaTanya Wilson, 7 years old, taken out of her own bedroom through a window on Verbena Street on the night before her birthday, while her family slept in the next room. Aaron Weich, 10, found under a railroad trestle off Fairburn Road with a broken neck, initially ruled an accidental fall. Anthony Carter, 9, stabbed multiple times, found behind a warehouse a few blocks from his own house on Wells Street. Earl Terrell, 11, who left the South Bend Park swimming pool on July 30th because a lifeguard threw him out for horseplay, told his cousins he was going to go call his aunt, and was never seen alive again. His family got phone calls afterward from a man with a rural accent demanding $200 and claiming the boy was in Alabama. The calls stopped. Nothing came of them. Clifford Jones, 13, visiting his grandmother from Cleveland, out collecting cans to earn spending money, strangled with a rope and dumped in a trash bin behind a laundromat on Hollywood Road. In that case, there was an actual witness, more than one. Several teenage employees of the laundromat implicated the manager, describing a man who had brought a boy into the back area and later hosed down the concrete. One of them said he had seen the boy's body. The manager had a prior record involving a child. He was polygraphed. And then the case fell apart. The witnesses were teenagers. 2 of them changed their accounts. The physical evidence was thin, and the prosecutor declined to charge. The case was eventually folded into the same pile as all the others. That single decision is one of the reasons a substantial number of people in Atlanta have never accepted and will never accept that one man did all of this. Autumn 1980 was the point at which the city stopped functioning normally. There was a curfew for minors. There were parents walking their children to bus stops in groups of 6 and 8. There were fathers standing on corners at 3 in the afternoon with baseball bats. Green ribbons appeared on trees, on lapels, on car antennas, on the doors of churches. The Chamber of Commerce fielded calls from convention organizers asking whether it was safe to bring families. Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. did a benefit at the Civic Center. Muhammad Ali offered reward money out of his own pocket. Burt Reynolds put up cash. Bill Cosby and Sammy Davis together added more. The reward fund climbed past $100,000, which in 1980 was more money than most of the families on the list had seen in a lifetime. Vice President George Bush came to town. Ted Kennedy came. Jesse Jackson came and said something that landed like a stone in the middle of the room, that these murders were not a mystery to Black America, that they were what happened to children the country had already decided were disposable, and that if 29 white children had gone missing in Buckhead, the National Guard would have been in the streets by the 4th one. And in the middle of all of it, on the afternoon of October 13th, 1980, a gas furnace exploded in the basement of the Bowen Homes Day Care Center on the northwest side. The blast blew out a wall. 4 preschoolers and 1 adult teacher were killed. Before the fire department could finish saying the word accident, half of Atlanta believed it was a bombing. A crowd of several hundred formed at the scene, then at the hospital. Commissioner Brown was shouted down. Mayor Jackson was shouted down. It did not matter what the engineers found in the wreckage of the boiler. The city had reached the stage of a crisis, where official explanations no longer had any purchase at all, and every new death from any cause went straight into the same story. What the task force actually had at that point was almost nothing. Fibers, maybe. A handful of unusual textile traces recovered from clothing and skin, sitting in the FBI lab in Washington, while a microscopist named Harold Dedman worked through them. A pattern of dump sites near roadways and water. A rough profile from the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit at Quantico, suggesting the killer was a young black male, physically small, likely a local, likely someone who could approach a street-smart child without triggering alarm. That profile was itself explosive, because the assumption in the streets was Klan, and there was a real basis for that assumption in Georgia in 1980. The GBI, in fact, ran an undercover investigation into a clan family named the Sanderses out of southwest Atlanta. An informant reported that one of the brothers had said he wanted to start a race war by killing black children, one a month. Another brother allegedly said something about a specific victim before that victim's body was found. One of them failed a polygraph. Agents wired an informant, wrote reports, and then the investigation was quietly shelved, with the conclusion that the talk was talk. Those files were sealed for decades. When portions surfaced in the 1990s, they did not resolve anything. They only made the hole in the middle of the case wider. Then, in the winter of 1980 into 1981, the victims changed. Patrick Baltazar, 11, who called the task force office himself before he died to say a man was following him and was found in a wooded area behind an office park on Buford Highway in DeKalb County. Curtis Walker, 13, taken from a housing project found in the South River. Timothy Hill, 13, found in the Chattahoochee. And then Joseph Bell, 15. Larry Rogers, 20, who was mildly disabled. Michael McIntosh, 23. John Porter, 28, stabbed. Jimmy Ray Payne, 21, an ex-convict, found in the river in April 1981. The list was no longer a list of children. It was young men, some with records, some drifting between rooming houses, several of them found in water. The river mattered enormously, because by then, the Atlanta newspapers had reported the one piece of forensic evidence the task force actually possessed, that fibers were being recovered from the bodies and from clothing, and that investigators believed the fibers would identify the killer's house or car. It ran in February 1981. Whoever was doing this appeared to read the paper. After that story, bodies stopped turning up, clothed in wooded lots, and started turning up nude in rivers. Moving water strips fiber evidence off a body more efficiently than anything a killer could accomplish himself with a brush and a bucket. That is why, in May 1981, the FBI was sitting on bridges. They picked 14 crossings over the Chattahoochee and the South River and put men on them, in cars, in the weeds, under the spans, with night vision and radios and instructions to log every vehicle that slowed. Night after night, 2 weeks, nothing but drunk drivers and fishermen. There was pressure to shut it down. The surveillance was expensive. It was tying up agents, and Atlanta's police department had a general homicide rate to worry about that had nothing at all to do with the task force list. The plan was to end it in a matter of days. And then the splash. The man in the station wagon was named Wayne Bertram Williams. He lived with his parents, Homer and Fay, both retired Atlanta public school teachers, in a modest brick house at 1817 Penelope Road in the Dixie Hills neighborhood, about 4 miles from the bridge. He was an only child, and by every account, an unusual one. At 12, he was building radio equipment in the basement out of scavenged parts. At 14, he was running a licensed low-power radio station out of that basement, call sign WRAZ, broadcasting soul records to a few blocks of northwest Atlanta, and getting written up admiringly in the Atlanta Journal for it. He had wanted to be an engineer, then a broadcaster. He enrolled at Georgia State and left without a degree. He was a police buff. He monitored scanners constantly, kept a red light in his car, and drove to accident scenes and fires to photograph them, then sold the pictures to local television stations, sometimes arriving before the fire trucks, which more than one reporter found strange enough to remember. He had a driver's license altered with a press designation. He had business cards printed identifying him as a talent scout for a management company, and he handed them out to teenage boys in shopping malls, at bus stops, and in housing projects, offering auditions for a Jackson 5 style singing group he said he was assembling. Some of the boys he approached later told investigators he offered them money. Several described a man who talked fast, dropped names, and knew a great deal about the music business, without ever quite producing a record. When the officers stopped him on the bridge that night, they had no body. They had no crime. They let him go at around 3 a.m, but they had his name, his tag number, his scanner, and a story. An audition with a singer he named at an address on Spalding Drive at a specific time. Agents checked it that same day. The woman did not exist. The address was wrong. The phone number he gave rang to a stranger. The audition was not real. Nathaniel Cater's body came up 2 days later, downstream. Jimmy Ray Payne's had come up a month earlier, less than a mile from the same bridge. Both had fibers on them. The task force put Williams under 24-hour surveillance. He noticed within a day and began driving in slow circles through his own neighborhood, doubling back, pulling into driveways, waving at the agents behind him. Then he did something no suspect in a case like this had ever done. He called a press conference in his parents' front yard, set up folding chairs, and handed out mimeographed copies of his own resume to reporters. He told them he was being framed. He said he was a working professional with references. He said on camera that this was ridiculous, that he had never killed anybody, and that the FBI had picked him because he was convenient. He took a polygraph voluntarily. The examiner reported deception on the relevant questions. He then sat for a 9-hour interview at Task Force headquarters, came back, and sat for roughly 12 more hours of questioning across several sessions, and for the first several rounds, he never asked for an attorney. He talked. He corrected the agent's grammar. He drew them diagrams. He told them he had been on the bridge to check a phone number in a notebook. Then came the search warrant on June 3rd. And in the house on Penelope Road, investigators found a bedspread. The fibers on the bodies were unusual, and this is the part of the case that has been argued about for 4 decades. It was a coarse yellow-green nylon fiber with a trilobal cross-section. 3 lobes like a clover in profile, a shape engineered to catch and throw light, so carpet would look lustrous. It had been manufactured by the Wellman Corporation and sold to the West Point Pepperell Mill in Dalton, Georgia, which spun it into a carpet marketed under the name Luxair, color English olive. The FBI laboratory traced the production run. The fiber had been made for roughly a single year, ending in 1971, and the carpet had been sold through outlets in 10 southeastern states. Working from mill sales figures and Atlanta area housing data, the Bureau estimated that at most 82 houses in the entire metro Atlanta region had that specific carpet installed. The house at 1817 Penelope Road had it in Wayne Williams' bedroom. Along with it, the search produced a violet and green acetate bedspread, whose fibers matched violet fibers found on victims. And there was Sheba, the family's German shepherd. Dog hairs recovered from multiple bodies were consistent with hers. The trial began on January 6, 1982, in Fulton County Superior Court, in the courtroom of Judge Clarence Cooper, and here's what makes it one of the strangest prosecutions in American history. Wayne Williams was tried for the murders of 2 adults, Nathaniel Cater, 27, Jimmy Ray Payne, 21. Not one child, not Yusuf Bell, not Angel Lanier, not LaTanya Wilson, not Teddy Smith, Not one of the names the mothers had carried downtown on a mimeographed sheet. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Louis Slatton, with Jack Mallard and Gordon Miller trying the case, asked the judge to admit evidence from 10 other killings as pattern evidence to show a signature. Judge Cooper allowed it. So for 9 weeks, the jury of 9 black and 3 white citizens heard testimony about the deaths of children in a trial where no child's death was formally charged. They heard from teenage boys who said Williams had approached them. They heard from a man who said Williams had once slapped him. They heard Harold Dedman explain trilobal cross-sections with charts. The defense, led by Al Binder of Jackson, Mississippi, with Mary Welcome, argued that the fiber evidence was statistical smoke. 82 houses in Atlanta had that carpet, and the Bureau's own estimate was an estimate. Fibers travel, on shoes, on car seats, in air. The probability figures the prosecution recited had been constructed to sound like certainty, and were not certainty. They pointed out that Jimmy Ray Payne's death had originally been classified as undetermined by the medical examiner, and was reclassified as homicide only after Williams became a suspect. They pointed out that Nathaniel Cater's death had also been difficult to classify. They pointed out, correctly, that there was no eyewitness to either killing. No confession, no fingerprints, no blood. No physical evidence tying Wayne Williams to any child at all. The prosecution's best moment was not a fiber. It was Williams himself. He insisted on taking the stand. For a day and a half he was calm, articulate, faintly superior. Then, under cross-examination by Jack Mallard, he came apart in front of the jury. He was condescending, then irritable, then shouting. He accused the FBI of being incompetent and said the agents couldn't find a bicycle in a bathtub. He called the prosecutor a fool. Mallard, who had a slow Georgia delivery and a gift for timing, walked up close to the witness box, put a hand on Williams' shoulder, lowered his voice almost to a whisper, and asked him whether he panicked when he wrapped his fingers around Nathaniel Cater's throat. Williams said no. He said he had never even been scared. The jury watched a soft-spoken 23-year-old in glasses turn into something else for about 20 minutes on a witness stand, and several jurors said afterward that this was the moment. On February 27, 1982, after roughly 12 hours of deliberation over 2 days, they convicted him on both counts of murder. Judge Cooper gave him 2 consecutive life sentences. Within days, and this is the part that has never stopped generating anger in Atlanta, the task force announced that 22 of the 29 cases on the list were being closed and administratively attributed to Williams. No charges, no trials, no determination in open court. The remaining cases stayed open and were never solved. The Committee to Stop Children's Murders, the mothers who had built the list in the first place while the city told them they were imagining a pattern, objected immediately and publicly. Camille Bell said flatly that she did not believe the man convicted of killing 2 adult men had killed her 9-year-old son. Willie Mae Mathies said the same about Jeffrey. They asked for hearings. They were not given hearings. The task force disbanded. The green ribbons came down off the trees over the following year, and Atlanta went back to being the city too busy to hate. Wayne Williams is 67 years old and has been in Georgia custody for 43 years, currently at Telfair State Prison in Helena. He has maintained his innocence continuously, through direct appeal, through state habeas, through federal habeas, through every documentary crew that has come through the visiting room. In 2005, DeKalb County reopened 5 of the cases and then closed them again. In 2007, DNA testing on dog hair produced a result described as consistent with Sheba, but not unique to her, meaning it could not exclude other German Shepherds. In 2019, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, with Police Chief Erica Shields, ordered the surviving physical evidence retested using modern methods. Some of it had degraded past use. Some of it, after nearly 40 years in storage across multiple jurisdictions, simply could not be located. As of now, no result has changed anything. What remains is a case where the arithmetic never quite closes. 29 names on a list, 2 convictions, both for adults, neither of whom was a child. A killer who may have been one man, or one man plus several others operating in the same city at the same time against the same population, the uncomfortable possibility, and the one a substantial number of Atlantans have believed since the day the task force closed 22 files by press release. A Klan investigation sealed for decades. A laundromat manager never charged. A police department that took 10 months to admit a pattern existed. And a group of mothers with a card table and a mimeograph machine who saw it first, said it out loud, were told they were hysterical and were proven right. If this one stayed with you, there is another case on this channel where the list of victims was longer, the investigation ran nearly as long, and the man who finally cracked it was the only detective who refused to close the file. It's waiting for you next.